Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Halton Police Board meeting of 2022. Those of you who are regular viewers are aware that at the first calendar meeting of the year, the first order of business is the election of a chair and vice chair for the year. I'd like to open the floor to nominations for the position of chair. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, I'll nominate Councillor Jeff Knoll.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? I'm seeing none. So Councillor Knoll has been nominated as chair. All those in favor, please raise your hands. And that carries. Congratulations, Councillor Knoll. You've been elected chair for 2022. If you'd like to take the gavel and conduct the election of the vice chair, please.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you everybody for choosing me again to be your chair for the upcoming year. It was a great honor to serve in that role for 2021, and I look forward to an exciting 2022, and certainly anxious to work on my objectives for the year now that the election's over, and contribute to our performance, results-based management philosophy that we are putting together over the coming year. I'm looking for nominations for the chair, or for the position of vice chair at this time. Clerk.
I'll nominate board member Ingrid Han.
Thank you very much. Are there further nominations for that position? Graham, do we require seconders for nominations?
No.
Okay. I know you didn't ask for one. I just, for some reason, thought that you required a seconder. Are there further nominations? Navneet?
I would like to nominate Kurt Allen.
Thank you. Kurt's been nominated. Kurt, oh, sorry. First of all, Ingrid, do you accept your nomination?
Yes, I would do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kurt, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Okay. Are there further nominations for the position of vice chair? I'm not seeing any nominations. So at this time, it's just a simple vote up and down, right? Is that correct, Graham? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. So we have two nominations for the position of vice chair. I'm going to call them in alphabetical order, I guess. We'll start with Kurt Allen. Those in favor of Kurt Allen as vice chair? 1, 2. And Kurt's not voting for himself. Those in favor of Ingrid Han for vice chair? 1, 2, 3. So that is carried. Okay, congratulations, Ingrid. You are the vice chair again for 2020. I can't talk this morning. 2021. I think my lips are still frozen from coming into work. Congratulations on your reappointment. Members of the board, I want to draw your attention to the agenda, and we get moving into our work for the day. Members of the board, are there regrets today? I know that Councillor Pavan Parmar is regrets today. Well, she will not be able to attend. She has an obligation outside of work, so she will not be with us today. Are there any further regrets today? I don't see any. Disclosures of conflicts of interest, members of the board. I'm not seeing any disclosures of conflict of interest. We'll move along. Members of the board, we have our items, our agenda. I am just not in speaking condition today. We have our minutes from the meeting held on December 16th that have been circulated and are subject to your approval. Can I get a motion with respect to those minutes? Thank you, Clark. Any comments? Kurt? Nope, you seconding. Thank you very much. Any comments, questions, errors, or omissions with respect to the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I believe that Ms. Sakon had her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. I apologize now. Can I help you?
I just need some clarity on the vote again.
Which vote?
The chair, vice chair.
What clarity do you require?
I was just wondering which were the votes. It would just happen so quickly. So who was in favor?
Graham?
It was 2 votes in favor of Kurt and 3 votes in favor of Ingrid.
And the 3 votes for Ingrid were
Yes,
from?
that's correct.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry.
The
Uh,
3 votes from Ingrid was from,
It's not a recorded vote. It was a show of hands. And unless the members are happy to disclose who they voted for, I don't believe it's my position to do so.
okay, I just was wondering whether the vice chair nominated could vote for themselves.
Everyone has a vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham, did you see the note from Fred? He needs to be let in as a panelist.
Yes, I did. We're working on
Okay.
it.
Okay. So there are no comments, questions, errors, or omissions with respect to the public minutes. Any objection to the approval of the minutes as circulated? I'm not seeing any, so those are approved. We do not have any presentations in our public agenda this morning, so I draw your attention to our consent agenda. And you'll note that there are 5 items on the consent agenda, starting with Halton happenings. Any questions, comments on any of these consent agenda items this morning?
Mr. Chair, I do have one on Halton happenings, if I
Okay,
could.
3.1, anything further? Navneet?
I have one on 3.1 as well.
Okay, anything further on 2, 3, 4, or 5? Ingrid?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have one on 3.3, please.
Okay. Don?
3.4.
Okay, you know what? Let's go one by one. We'll start out with 3.1 Halton happenings then. First up was Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's just a comment for the participation of the service and a lot of elected officials and the public on the Chanukah candle lighting on December the 3rd. It was great to see it mentioned in here. And unfortunately, we weren't all able to gather in person, but especially today with it being the Holocaust Remembrance Day, I thought it was important to pause on this one just to make reference of us participating in that. And it was great to see the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office being part of that and the service being such a tremendous part of that as well, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, Clark. I was personally in attendance at the event. It was certainly a different event from years past, being predominantly virtual and only a handful of people in the room, but it's still, notwithstanding that was a moving day, and it was lovely to see members of our team representing the service at that event again this year. Nav was up next for 3.1.
Okay, so now.
Thank you. I just have a question, whether I like the information that's presented. I was just wondering whether in the future we could have some sort of, I said stats for the previous months recorded in the same document. That would be very helpful.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I think I called you and you weren't for 3.1. Which event is, or which one is this for?
It's for 3.1.
It is? Which stats were you thinking about?
So anything that's provided in terms of risk stats, this is always for a month. I was just wondering if it was, we could reflect previous months in the same document so we can take a look at what the trends have been.
So you're referring to the Halton happenings
Yes.
document?
Yes.
Okay, it's who wants to comment on that? I'm not sure that Chief Tanner.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I know, Nav, this is really intended to just be a summary of a lot of the community events that are going on. We've actually questioned it ourselves, the deputies and I, the value of it, but it's always seemed to be so valuable to the board members to give them a snapshot of what's happening more on the community side. We do a lot of statistics when it comes to crime and a variety of different measures that we capture differently. So we're a little concerned about not continuing this the way it is, because we've invested the time and things, but it does take a substantial amount of staff time, and Deputy Chief Wilkie could speak to that probably more, how this is put together. But we don't want it to really grow beyond that, because there's a lot of other mechanisms for us to report on, reported crime, how many crimes were reported. There's all sorts of statistics that we could give separately and that we do quarterly or annually. But this really is a high level, almost like a public facing document that we could put out as a pamphlet to the citizens and not be that specific.
I think that's great. If that's the objective, I was just wondering if the information can be put out separately then, not for public release. It would be very valuable for the board.
So what information specifically are you looking for here, Navneet?
So there's information regarding like risk stats. You know, how many occurrences for December. It's always for December, and it's monthly because it is a monthly publication. I was just, you know, to me, it would be a lot of legwork to determine, okay, are we getting better, worse, or not? So I would like to look back to see what the trends would be in order to, you know, comment effectively on this information. And I don't believe we see the same information elsewhere. I could be wrong.
Perhaps that's statistics more, because again, as the chief indicated, this is more of a review of events and activities that happened the previous month. I'm not sure this is a statistical analysis, nor is it in any way compiled as such that I've ever experienced. Perhaps this is something that we could bring up under new business as a potential future request report, because I'm not sure Halton happenings, and correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah,
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong, members of the executive. I don't think that this is a statistics type document. It's more of a general informational document. Deputy Wilkie.
Good morning, and through the chair. Yes, this was a qualitative piece to supplement the statistical reports that are tendered on a monthly, quarterly, or annually basis. The idea was when we introduced some stats to demonstrate the value of investments like our mobile crisis rapid response team. We talk about the percentage of calls that our mental health professionals will attend. And so that's why we started to insert, you know, numbers to this qualitative report. Similar, you know, because of the board's interest and our interest in road safety and commercial motor vehicle types of investigations, we will insert pieces about initiatives and joint forces kind of enforcement pieces, and we'll introduce stats then. To do a statistical analysis, that's actually triggering a number of other entities provincially and in our organization that aren't connected to this report. So if there's something specific like road safety, we provide that on an annual basis. If it's something about mental health, we do provide key updates on our investments, and you know, we will be providing some updates in terms of expanding our mobile crisis response teams later this year. So I think that's where that lives. This was just to kind of like fill in some of the gaps, so it's not so formal and sanitized. It's some stories that the board can trigger or, you know, kind of resonate with in terms of some of the things that you don't always hear in the media.
Thank you, Deputy. I think if you want to hold that until other business now, perhaps
We can talk about it more fuller then.
yeah, I would suggest that what you might want to do at that time is request the staff and Fred to work on a statistical report. I think that's what Fred was about to say when you stuck your hand up, or did you want to comment on that, Fred?
I was just saying, how about I do an audit, Nav, and see where these particular numbers fit in the other reports and find out if there's any gaps.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we can decide, the board can decide if it wants those gaps addressed.
Okay.
And we'll build that into the governance calendar, which is obviously still has to be populated.
Perfect. Thank you.
So now that when I call for the business, let's make that motion, and then we
Yes.
can get that formally put on the action registry. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Those with your hands up, are either of you wishing to speak to 3.1? Kurt.
Yes, I am. I was pleased to see that the service coordinated the festive season ride program. I'd appreciate a comment on the outcome. I mean, are the incidents of DUI going up or down? The relationship between alcohol and drug issues associated with that? I'm just looking for a comment if one is available. Thank you.
Certainly. Do you want to start, Raj, and I'll pitch in?
I might throw this one to Inspector Craddock from our Regional Community Mobilization Bureau.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I don't have the actual ride stats right in front of me. Traffic Services reports up through the Regional Community Mobilization Bureau, and they coordinate ride with the district response units. What I can say just historically with our ride program is that year-round drinking and driving and drug-related driving offenses continues to be a problem. It's one of those numbers that's kind of hard sometimes to explain because the more cars we pull over, the more sobriety tests we do, often the numbers are reflective of that. So we can definitely get the results of that festive ride program for you. But it does, and what we're seeing really on a regular daily basis year round is that our officers are out there and they're still laying those impaired driving and over 80 charges and now the drug related charges as well.
Chief?
Thanks, Julie. And what I would add through the chair and Mr. Allen is impaired driving is not going down substantially, that's for sure. I think it actually is up. I'm kind of astounded sometimes. There was a point in time where we were really seeing, it was the mid 50-year-old male that was typically being arrested for impaired driving, if I can summarize it like that. It's very much across the board now. There were some years, 10 or 12 years ago, where young people seem to be getting the message. It seems to be all ages at this point in time. There are some services that I think are reporting as high as 40 or 50% drug impaired as opposed to alcohol impaired. So I do believe that marijuana is a big part of that. We have a number of things when the deputies and I and others read our overnight occurrences or our daily occurrences twice a day from each of our districts where, drivers are pulled over, obvious marijuana smoke in the vehicle, impairment. And that really leads to a further concern on what potential impacts of legalization of other drugs may have in the future. That may be a further issue for our road safety. People that are addicted to fentanyl, opioids, heroin, they may be driving already. That might not change their driving habits, but we had a very, very high level sort of organized crime, drug, decriminalization report came out nationally from CISC yesterday, speaking about there really is no hope, there no belief that legalizing or decriminalizing all these other drugs is going to impact organized crime at all in the first place, and marijuana legalization hasn't either. They're making just as much money through organized crime groups on marijuana as before it was legal, and now we probably have increased issues on the roadway. So it's an ongoing concern, and it's amazing there are so many people that are still being arrested for impaired. And I think the other thing that I want to mention is and it speaks really highly of our community here in Halton, is a large percentage of our impaired drivers that are arrested now, this year, last year, recent years, are as a result of citizens calling that driver in. I think back when I started, it was mainly us driving around in vehicles and happening to notice a car in front of us swerving. A large number of our impaired arrests are now people calling us, calling 911, takeout restaurants, LCBO, beer stores, employees calling and saying someone's just left and we feel they're impaired. So I think that's a positive part of our relationship with the community. So we certainly encourage that and to make our roads as safe as we can.
Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate those comments. And I guess sadly, the message is that it's going up, if anything, and not going down. And I think it's important that the community be aware of that because it's a responsibility of all of us to try and help, I think, in this area. Thanks.
Thanks, Kurt. Is there anything further on 3.1? I just have something quickly, and then I'll come to you, Ingrid, because you're on a different item, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so just on the coast update, I noted that there was an issue around I guess, insufficient staffing for the month of December due to the pandemic and other staff shortages. Is that ongoing? And is there an end in sight for that, or is this still an issue?
I can speak to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the staffing relates to the onboarding and education of our mental health professionals. We're having a hard time just by virtue of the stressors of the pandemic and other related health issues in our society that are impacting people's desire to commit to these types of professions. And as such, it impacts our ability to partner with them and deploy in those specific units. Having said that, we have been quite flexible in how we are deploying, and we are still providing adequate service given the resources that we have. The good news is that we do have opportunities ahead with some additional funding to expand the program. We have our officers, we've already had them set aside in terms of who could come into the unit to support on a sworn side. And now we're working with our partners to identify the mental health professional that can come and assist us in the deployment in those two areas. So we're excited about this opportunity, and we're just waiting for their bandwidth to increase.
Okay, that's good news. I was a little alarmed when I saw that we were having staffing shortages. I wasn't sure how that would be dealt with, but that seems like it's under control. So thank you for that. Anything further on 3.1? Can I get a motion to receive 3.1, please? Moved by Kurt, seconded by Clark. Thank you. Further discussion? Objections to the receipt? Seeing none, we'll move on. Ingrid, remind me which item you wanted to speak to?
3.3, Mr. Chair.
3.3. You're up, please.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on 3.2 when the time is right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, why don't you go ahead, Kurt?
Yeah, I'm a little confused. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want show of hands for all of this or like raise hand or.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if we can continue the sort of tradition of using the hand, then it's better. It's easier for me to manage and I'm not skipping over people.
Okay,
Thank
my comment on 3.2 is I noticed that there were, I think it was 165 reclassifications on the unit on the sworn side of the organization, and I just wondered if that was an unusually high number. Just looking for a comment in that regard. And I'm just not clear on, perhaps I'm just not clear on what a reclassification means. To me, it means that a position description was reviewed and the position level was changed, but perhaps I'm misinterpreting.
Thank you. Deputy Hill?
My computer's a little slow warming that up, but if I understand what you're saying, the reclassifications under sworn is referring to the fact that sworn members go from fourth, third, second, first class. Okay. So that's pretty normal for us.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
No worries. My pleasure.
Thanks, Kurt. Anything further on 3.2? Kurt, would you mind moving the receipt of 3.2 for me, please? Thank you. Seconded by? Thanks, Nav. Any comments or questions? Objections to the receipt? That's received. Thank you very much. Moving on to 3.3, Ingrid.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions regarding the complaints to the OIPRD. I see we had 109 last year, certainly very busy, along with the 113 phone calls. Of the 109, 68 were not accepted, leaving the 41 to be addressed. The question I have is there a timeline for the 41 to be addressed?
Who wants to take that on? Chief?
Sorry, I'll certainly start. I don't know if others are having issues with Diligtrust.
I am.
I can't get things to open, but I did read this over just this morning. So my first thought through the chair, Ms. Han, was that the 109 is sort of on par with maybe a little bit higher from recent years. But it's encouraging that the OIPRD, the Office of the Independent Public Review Director, actually independently screened out so many of them that we were down to, I think you said 40 or so that came to us. There is a time limit for the complainants to bring those issues forward to the OIPRD, which was normally within 6 months or so. And then we can take longer to deal with them. When we deal with them, we then need to report back to the OIPRD and say, here's the results of the investigation, whether it's substantiated, unsubstantiated, or what was done with it. Some complainants withdraw their complaint, and there's sort of a mediated resolution or an understanding that they come to along with the officers or the investigators. So I'm quite comfortable with the level, the number, the total number reported, and the number that were brought to us for investigation. Some of them also carry on just by nature of when they're reported from year to year. So we'll have some complaints that are being dealt with from 2021 that are still on the books going into 2022. I think it was 9, if I remember from this morning, that are still perhaps being looked at. But overall, I'm very comfortable with the numbers, given the number of interactions that our officers have with the public, and the arrests and the tickets and all the rest that they're dealing with on the front lines.
And one would assume that the increase in the complaints, COVID may be a contributing factor as well.
It may be. I do know we had a couple of related complaints that were, an officer approaching a vehicle, and the individual inside the car didn't have a mask to wear, and they felt that they were put at risk by the officer. Of course, if you're doing something like a ride check, part of doing a ride check is whether you detect the odor of an alcoholic beverage on the breath of the driver. So it gets complicated in some of those situations. But COVID, I think, has added, I think we saw it through Bell Let's Talk Day yesterday. I think COVID has definitely added to everyone's stress levels over the past 2 years now.
So when the 41 are addressed, does that end the process, or is there another step that the complainant can take?
Yeah, no, certainly after our investigators, it's a bone of contention in some ways. I have often said, I think the OIPRD should be staffed and funded much higher than they are, and actually do all of these investigations.
Right.
It's not truly independent if they review it, send it back to the service to investigate, and then review the service's investigation. At that point, the OIPRD decides whether they're satisfied with the investigation that was done by the service and the result. And after that, the complainant also has an opportunity to appeal that decision to the OIPRD, at which point the OIPRD would review the decision and consider whether it should be reopened or not. I would say by and large, they do not reopen them. And I've seen some of the decision letters from the somewhat new director that's there. Seems like a very professional individual.
And my question is similar for the workplace violence and harassment investigations, where in 2021 we had 10, and there were 2 that were still outstanding. And of those 10, 4 were unsubstantiated and 4 were receiving a formal resolution. Is there, for the area that the course of action that has been taken, does it stop there? Is that the end then?
I think Tracy is actually prepared to speak to this in general terms, because of course we're in a public session and we're dealing with employees, confidential employee related matters. But I think Tracy can talk to some of the generalities. Some of the complaints are of a relatively very minor nature. Something, it may be a misunderstanding between 2 employees, or it may be something much more serious than that. And if it is a more serious situation, we will go outside. Actually, to a law firm recently we have gone to, who will independently investigate some of these complaints. So I'll either turn it over to Deputy Chief Hill or Tracy.
Tracy's our pro. I'll defer to her. Thank you.
Tracy, you're on mute. Nope.
Now, can you hear me?
There we
Yes.
go.
Okay. No, just to touch on Ingrid's point, once we have she's asking about the formal resolutions, what we do after, we usually do a follow-up, usually within a month, to see how things are going on, and we keep them in the back of mind for a 6-month follow-up in 1 year, depending on the severity or the situation, even if it's a workplace dispute or misunderstandings, such as the chief has mentioned. It's to ensure we maintain that environment. So we're being very proactive in these processes, to not say once we have a formal resolution, it's done. We continue a follow-up, which continues for about a year, which we'll be doing in 2022 for most of them.
And then the complainant signs off on the complaint, so to speak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. That's very diligent, likely very time consuming, but a very good approach. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. On the note of diligent, I just want to point out to everybody that it seems that we are all having problems with DigiTrust this morning. If I'm not mistaken, I've heard it now from Deputy Hill, and I also had a private message pop up. I've asked Graham to send out a PDF version of the agenda. Excuse me. So you should have that in your mailbox now. So if you're unable to load DigiTrust at any point, please refer to the PDF that was sent into to your email. I've also asked Graham to file a support complaint, I guess, or support ticket with DigiTrust, so they can attempt to deal with the matter. It's taking me up to 5 minutes to load a report, which seems unacceptable. Kurt, you're up next on 3.3.
I think my question that I had has been answered, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're all aware that these kind of complaints can be very debilitating for an organization, and I'm pleased to see that the service is on top of it, and I appreciate receiving the information. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. Navneet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just one question regarding procedure for the chief. I was just looking into, I guess, if you look at table 1, it discusses the number of complaints, and then those that are referred to the service after the OIPRD reviews. But on the other hand, with respect to table 2, we have disposition of all conducted complaints that are then unsubstantiated by the service. Does that mean that once they're substantiated by the OIPRD, that they can be unsubstantiated by the service?
It can. I look at the process as the OIPRD receives the complaint.
Mm-hmm.
They determine whether there is merit on the surface of it, what the severity of it, and they do a screen in or screen out. They don't do an investigation. They will retain the odd complaint and investigate it. It doesn't happen too often. Most of them will come back to the service. And that's where I say, in my ideal world, because we have professional standards, full-time officers working in this environment doing these investigations, basically, instead of it being totally independent at the provincial level and OIPRD doing them, they farm them back out to us. And it's a bit of almost a lose-lose situation. I mean, we investigate them, and where's the independence? Now, the professional standards people are relatively independent and very professional and substantiate, and sometimes we charge our officers as a result, which is a very, very positive thing if you look at it from a community perspective. But really, I mean, the SIU don't send their investigations back to us to do it. And my position is the OIPRD should do them. That's not the reality. So they do send them back to us. We're more or less stuck with them, paid for at the municipal level, and then trying to make it as independent and transparent as we can. That's the process. So they don't investigate them and decide it's substantiated and then send it to us. At the point where they send it to us, it's yet to be determined whether it's substantiated or not. They just think it's important enough if I can phrase it that way, for us to have a more in-depth look at it.
Thank you, Chief. I having developed so many complaints management processes with various companies, I would believe that we do need to have independence on this process for full transparency and to be effective as a police force. So I would like to see maybe a further discussion, Jeff, on this at the business level to really see what we can do in terms of improving that process.
Chief?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that maybe the board would want to go one step further, and Mr. Kostonen would be more knowledgeable of this aspect, but I think you could lobby the OAPSB to lobby the province if the boards across the province feel that this should be independently done by a separate organization parallel to the Special Investigations Unit. I'd be fine with that.
Perhaps an outcome would be to have Fred report back to us on this at our next meeting in terms of the process and the options, rather than getting into a discussion about it right now. Is that something you could manage, Fred?
I could, but of course the actual process is not managed by the board.
Right.
And the board is restricted from being involved in the actual process. I see Ken's got his hands up. I think there's, in terms of advocating, I can report on that. And it comes down to money. Independent investigations, especially if they're centralized provincially, are extremely expensive. And that's something that slid off the new legislation, both the previous Liberal government and the current Conservative government. In terms of the options regarding the actual process, perhaps Ken can address that, because it's a management run.
Right now, through you, Mr. Chair, during the process by which successive governments have looked to reform the Police Services Act, the idea of having public complaints investigated, all of the complaints being investigated by the OIPRD or an agency like that. It was studied, was looked at, and for the time being, when the new act comes in, public complaints are still going to be likely referred back to the local police service. The change in the legislation is that when a complaint is substantiated and an informal resolution cannot be achieved and the matter goes to a hearing, that the hearings will no longer be held by hearing officers appointed by the chief. Rather, they will be independent arbitrators, so to speak. And as well, there's also the possibility that the prosecutions will be done independently. But for the time being, the government's plan is to stick with this with the status quo for the investigation of public complaints.
Fred, and I'll come back to Nav. Fred?
I just will add that the Office of the Independent Police Review Director was established about 13 years ago. Before that, it was all internal to the service. So the big step in terms of transparency and independence was the establishment of a provincial body. And they still do some investigations, as you see on this chart, and they do screen all of the complaints. The actual investigations are, the vast majority are sent back to the service of jurisdiction to investigate by their professional standards folks. So it's not perfect, Nav, as Steve, the chief, alluded to, but that's where things have landed thus far. I also would draw your attention to the recently released annual report by the OIPRD, where about 2.2% of the public complaints across the province were substantiated. We have none here in Halton, and additionally, about 11% of those substantiated of the complaints were informally resolved, whereas here it was about 7%. So you can compare those numbers too. I didn't run them. I just looked it up now. I could do those comparisons for the SIU, and certainly they're not available on the chief's complaint internal side or the workplace violence or harassment yet. But I think there's some measure of confidence in the way that they're done here simply by comparing the public complaint statistics in Halton relative to province-wide from the Independent Police Review Director's annual report. So, I mean, we can talk about where to go from here, certainly, and maybe that's the subject of a training session on how complaints are, the intake and how they're resolved and all that. At the end of the day, the board is responsible to oversee how the chief handles complaints, but is restricted from getting involved in any of them.
And perhaps putting this on the agenda for the upcoming workshop that you are or potentially organizing may be worthwhile, Fred, as a training session for board members.
Noted.
Thank you. Nav, anything further on this?
I guess I'm still a little bit uneasy about you know, the percentage of complaints that are unsubstantiated afterwards, after the review. So I do want to take this further, and I don't think it's a board training issue as much as what is an awareness from the board around how the process actually takes place and how effective that process is. And I think that's where I want to go forward with.
Well, I think that I think you could combine both into an in-service event. It would be both training and understanding, but also discussion of the processes as well. I think it would be something we could put on for that upcoming workshop for board members.
Okay.
Anything further on this? I'm sorry, Chief Tanner, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, while I have mentioned that I don't think it's a perfect system in the province, when occurrences or when complaints are unsubstantiated here by our investigators, it still goes back to the OIPRD, and they review the facts of what's in that report to unsubstantiate it. So if there was a concern, that's also one more checkpoint in an imperfect system where the director of the OIPRD or someone reviewing our unsubstantiated occurrences could say, no, have another look at this one, or we're going to review this one. Or the next step also is the complainant can appeal those decisions to the OIPRD. So there's a couple of steps in there where the complainant can follow up in that impartial, unbiased section of our world called the OIPRD. So I think that is two good checks and balances on those occurrences as well, which of course most board members would not be aware of how that process works. So I think that part it is a positive.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay, and Fred is noted to bring this back for our next workshop. Can you move this the receipt of this item, please, Nav?
I had my hand up, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead.
Just, trying to figure out whether waving or putting that artificial.
No, putting the hand up is a good plan. I just unfortunately I just had sorted the screen a little differently, so I missed it.
No, I think I just wanted to make a comment on this. I think having a deeper dive into processes may be useful. I do take some confidence though in the transparency that there is around this process, where we get reports, we have the opportunity to discuss it. We have a new civilian head of human resources. The organization has an association that represents its members and staff. So I think perhaps having more knowledge of the process would be beneficial. But I do appreciate the information that we get. I always take particular notice of the workplace violence and harassment because of the impact they can have on an organization and it is 2021, and one hopes that we move beyond some of this over time. If you're looking for a seconder of the motion to take it to a workshop, I would be pleased to do that, Mr. Chair. I don't want to overload that one workshop though, because I think it's got the first item on it is an important one. Thank you.
Well, I think I would suggest we leave the management of the workshop to Fred's ability to juggle what could be potentially a busy agenda for that day, and see if we can fit it in on the next one, if not the following one. I'm not sure that we need a motion to refer it to a workshop. I believe that that can be just done on staff direction, but I do need a mover and seconder to receive the report. So now will you move the report? Thank you. Kurt seconding. Thank you very much. Further comments or questions? Any objection to the receipt? Seeing none, I note that that's been received and that Fred has noted to add that to the agenda of an upcoming board service workshop. The only other item on the, oh, sorry, we have two more items on the consent agenda. I don't think I had anybody. Oh, Don, you had a question. On which one, sir?
On 3.4 under communications, my questions are two, by the way. The first one of which is covered off. I'm just noticing here on the confidential board only agenda under Twitter. But as we constantly try to project the image of the board to the public and an invitation to participate, I was hoping that we could profile a picture's worth 1,000 words, a picture of the board, because I think that reflects, no disrespect to yourself, Jeff, okay, we know what you look like, but I think the public at large would be, I think, duly impressed, I hope they are, just by the diversity that we have on the board, okay, both gender, ethnicity, and it's a true reflection of who we are, and I think that might be more inviting for people to join us and participate. And it's just something I wanted to table to see if we could consider switching that photo.
Sure. Well, the photo on the newsletter was something established by my predecessor. I'm not particularly concerned one way or the other whose picture is on there. I believe that my photo is on there because the opening portion of that newsletter is a note from me. So I think that that's why that picture is attached to that particular article. I have no concerns or objections. In fact, you'll note that one of the first things that I did when working with Kimberly on the website is say I want a nice big picture of the board right up front so people can see who is representing them. So I certainly have no objection to additionally profiling the board on the newsletters. And certainly I think that that's an easy ask for Kimberly to insert a photo there. And again, I have no concerns one way or the other if my photo is there separately or not. But I do think again that the idea is that because the memo or because that particular portion of the newsletter is coming from me, that's why my photo's there. But I can leave that to Kimberly, but certainly I have no objection. I think it's a good idea to be constantly highlighting who's on the board. But I would suggest that perhaps we wait until next month when we have Pavan's picture to add to the board, because right now we don't have that. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Jeff. I knew that you would speak to the truth to those words, and especially with the 50th anniversary coming upon us right now, that some of us, I'm sure, Chief, you're aware of. Undoubtedly, you're part of that history. You are that history, but especially now that we're going to be celebrating 50 years of great policing here in the Halton region. So thank you very much, Jeff. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Would you be so kind as to move the receipt of that item, please? Don?
Yes.
Thank you. Seconded by? Thank you, Ingrid. Any comments, questions? Any objections to the receipt of that item? Seeing none, it's received. I'll also ask for a motion to receive 3.5. Nav, thank you. Seconded by? Thank you, Kurt. Any questions, comments? Any objections to receipt? Actually, is this one receive or is this one approve? Hopefully.
3.5 is received, sir.
Thank you. I can't unfortunately open anything on my Dillatrust still. I'm still going from a PDF. Okay, so that has been received. Thank you very much. Moving on to discussion items. 4.1 is limited tendering for Extreme Tire Garage. Does anybody wish to discuss this, or is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation? Kurt?
I'm prepared to move it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Nav. Any questions? Any objection to the approval? That's approved. We move on to item 5, which is operational verbal updates. I'll come to the chief first and see if you have anything to share today.
I will go to the deputies first. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, no problem. Deputy Wilkie, Deputy Hill, anything?
I'll go first. I
Okay.
just wanted to give an update. You would have seen it in the media, but I just wanted to give kudos to our major drug team about a project that we just recently had a sentencing on, Project Links. You would have heard me talk about it approximately in April of last year. We just got a conviction of one of our main targets in that, who, when he was arrested, was found in possession of 16 kilos of coke, 3 kilos of fentanyl, and $750,000 worth of cash. He just received a 13-year sentence in 222 days, plus he had to forfeit that cash. So it's an excellent sentence. It's on the high end of what we see. So it's a good ending to what is a lot of work and a lot of hours by our major drug team. So I just wanted to recognize them for that. Thank you.
It's always nice when the justice system recognizes the hard work done by the enforcement team. That's for sure. That's a fitting outcome. Deputy Wilkie.
My updates are for the closed session, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Chief. Anything further?
No, I think I mean, it's interesting looking forward to Monday and the slow reopening of the province again. So the service will adjust and support everyone across the community as we do that. I was going to say, I know Steve Siamra, Staff Sergeant Siamra, has been with us now just for a little while, and I think Deputy Chief Hill mentioned him in December as Jeff's exec officer. Ironically, Steve is one of our recent experts out of our Professional Standards Bureau, so I'm sure Steve was sitting there quietly listening to the discussion about all the complaints that he would have dealt with, many of them over the last couple of years. So we'll certainly call on Steve and Staff Sergeant Bale and others moving forward if we do presentations to the board on OIPRD types of complaints or internal complaints. But we've got one of our recent experts sitting right here with us on Zoom. So thanks for being here, Steve.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, moving on to our our public information action registry. And of course, as normal, I can't open it. Is there any, oh man, this is terrible. I will note that Graham sent me a note that he's reported the technical challenges now to Dillatrust. Is there anything to lift or add to the action registry at this point, Fred?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are we okay to receive the action registry? Oh, it just opened. Great. And it closed. This is like whack-a-mole.
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's anything problematic.
No, there's nothing problematic. I will note, because it just opened, that the first just disappeared again. The first item, which is the CGO's reporting on board expenses, has been fulfilled this morning. So I assume that can be. Just came back again. The first one is the CGO board governance expenditure report be issued semi-annually. I believe that was done today, so that can be struck from the report. Is that accurate, Fred?
I'm just keeping it there as a placeholder until the governance calendar is updated.
Okay,
because it is something that the board made a motion on. There's some in the other portions as well. You know, there's all of those, all of the different calendar of reports needs to be updated. I'll be going back to that once we get all the new administrative policies in place, because I think they will require some changes in what's reported.
Okay.
And possibly when it's reported. An example is some of the comparative data I gave this morning on one of
Okay.
on one of the items we need to include in the future, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the only thing that we would do is, of course, adjust the schedule of completion, and then the other 2 items are scheduled for next month. So I heard that Kurt was prepared to move receipt. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Ingrid. Any comments, questions? Any objection to the receipt? I'm not seeing any. Members of the board, I draw to your attention the public correspondence that has been received and was posted on Dillatrust. Does anybody wish to lift anything from that particular log of correspondence? See none, can I get a motion to receive the correspondence, please? Thank you, Ingrid. Seconded by Kurt. Thank you very much. Comments, questions? Objections to the receipt of the public correspondence? I'm not seeing any, so the public correspondence has been received. Under new business, I will circle back to Nav. You had a request that I suggest we bring up under new business, and that was that Fred, I guess, work with the service to develop or to, what was the term used, audit our reporting of statistics with the potential of providing a regular month-over-month update. Is that roughly accurate, Nav, as to what you're looking for?
If I could qualify,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
So what I said suggested is that I'll audit the Halton happenings to ensure that the statistics in Halton happenings are reported longitudinally in other reports, and where they are not, I'll identify it for the board to decide if they want certain things reported, the other items reported.
Nav, is that in keeping with your request?
Yes, so we want to look at if there's any overlaps or anything, that's fine. If there's something special, we want to see how we should be looking at that information. Thank you.
Okay. Kurt, you wanted to comment on this?
I did. I just don't want us to overlook that we're in the process of soon working on a new strategic plan, having biannual performance reports that the service submits. And I'm just wondering if there isn't potentially a way to deal with all of this through that process. In other words, we will have a new strategic plan. We will have performance objectives. The service will report, or has been reporting biannually, on its performance, which I think would be helpful if the reporting of that performance covered issues such as the ones, or this one that we're talking about.
I think it's a good point. Keep in mind, though, that the next strategic plan is not until 2023, I believe. Is that correct, Fred?
But we do have biannual performance reports
on the existing strategic plan. Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, just a suggestion.
Yeah, sure. Fred, did you want to comment on that?
Kurt's absolutely right. Everything is linked. It's part of this whole results-based governance initiative of the board last year. And I'm just trying to give you, eat the elephant one bite at a time. Nav's brought up one area to look at. But it definitely will feed into the strategic plan, the governance calendar, the evaluation programs. They're all interlinked. Absolutely.
Okay. I think we've covered this sufficiently and given Fred appropriate direction as to what we would like to see. Nav has agreed. Do we want to formalize? I guess we could just leave that as staff direction. Do you need a motion, Nav, or are you okay with staff direction on that?
I would like a motion to add to as an action so that we don't forget it. So that plus the workshop on the complaint.
Okay, so that's fine. So would you like to make that motion then, please?
As two separate ones, please.
Yeah.
Okay, to help me out with this, Fred.
Okay, so
I think Graham and I've got it. You just need to call a vote, Mr. Chair.
Can I just have Graham Graham, do you mind just summarizing these two motions so that I can make sure we know what we're voting on?
Okay, I believe I have one. I may need Fred to help on the other one. I do have the request that the CGO audit Halton happenings to ensure that all statistics are being properly reported to the board. And I didn't quite catch the second part.
I think the second motion is that the issue of complaint management be referred to an upcoming board workshop for further discussion and deliberation.
Thank you.
Okay, so now are you moving both of those?
Yes.
Okay, can I get a seconder and then I'll go to questions? Clark, you're seconding both? Thank you. Now, I'm just, with your permission, Clark, I'm just going to go to the chief because he's been waving at me for a few minutes now. So unless he's saying hi, I think he has something to add. Sir, you're muted.
That'll give me a chance to start off better. The only thing that causes us some concern, and it's been discussed by the board over my 10 years that I've been here back in Halton, it is like a make work project. We have enough work to do here. Our analysts have enough work to do. We will prepare and present anything to the board that the board needs. But I think sometimes we all forget what is already done. On an annual basis, perhaps we compare our crime severity index. We do all that stuff through the budget process, which the board is certainly a part of. We do it through our consultation with the public when we develop our strategic plan, as we did last time. And we have reports. This is the annual report from 2020. So the annual report for 2021 will take another 3 or 4 months to complete because we don't get the final statistics on year-end crime stats and things from Stats Canada until April or so. But this breaks down all the major crime categories, breaks it down by district because our municipal councils, mayors, and other municipal councillors want to know, well, okay, that's what's happening in Halton, but what's happening in Oakville, Burlington, Halton Hills, and Milton. So all of those things are in the annual report. I've got still a number of these printed copies here. If any of the board members still would like to have the 2020 annual report in printed version, I still sometimes prefer printed versions to the PDFs and things we put online. So we've got them here. And the 2021 one will come out with all of those statistical comparisons as well. If there's something specific, if it's impaired driving was a question today, we can highlight that. That will be in the annual report already. Was it up in 2021 compared to 2020? What do we think the drivers were? Mental health, domestic violence, and intimate partner violence. We always get asked, is that up or down? And Deputy Hill has discussed that with the board over the past few months. So we can do anything. We just don't want to overburden our analytical staff and things doing up separate reports, which the information may already be there. So Fred can sort of gather what people want or think they want or need, and we can probably find that it's already there. So I just would caution us to make it as simple as we can moving forward, and we'll do what the board needs.
I think that Fred was already ahead of you on this because he carefully used the term audit. So he specifically didn't say create or request. So I think that Fred's already a couple steps ahead, and auditing the existing resources, I think, is the key here. Is that fair, Fred?
I'm going to use the existing Halton happenings as the baseline. That's why it's part of the motion.
Yeah.
And I think it's fairly quick exercise to see what's reported in the annual report or other reports, and we'll see if there's any gaps, and if those gaps are actually relevant to the board's information needs. The board can decide that.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a make work project. It definitely does feed into the overall results-based governance piece again. So it's a good thing to do from time to time anyway. Validate if that the information being provided is congruent with the board's information needs, which is in itself congruent with the board's purpose.
Yes, I wouldn't worry about additional workload at the moment. Maybe for Fred, but not for the chief or your team at this moment. Clark, you have a question? Oh, I'm
okay with that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm okay with that workload.
Yeah, I thought so. Clark, go ahead.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair. So make sure I understand this correctly. So Fred is going to look at this longitudinally. Does that mean we have to give him the latitude to do it?
Fred, do you have a comment on this?
That's a good one, Mr. Somerville. Well, I think you already have given me the latitude, but your vote would help. Thank you.
Thanks, Clark. We always appreciate you. Okay, so that has been, I believe did we vote on that, Mr. Secretary? I believe we voted on those two motions, correct?
You had a mover and seconder. You didn't actually take a vote.
Okay. Any objection to the two motions in front of us? Seeing none, those are both approved. And I would call for any additional new business before we move on. Anything else to raise this morning? I'm not seeing any, so I will ask for a motion to move into a session closed to the public to deal with confidential items. Is there a motion for that? Thank you, Clark. Seconded by Don. Thank you very much. Any objection to moving into closed session? I'm not seeing any, so I will report to the public that we are moving into a session closed for the purposes of dealing with confidential items as permitted under legislation. I want to say a big thank you to members of the public who have joined us this morning. We always appreciate your interest and your participation at these meetings. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please make sure you feed them back to us because we're always interested in feedback from the public. We are your police board, and we certainly respect all of your concerns or comments. And as always, your participation on a month-by-month basis. So with that, I'm going to close the public session today. And members of the board, you have a separate link to go into our closed session. I would invite you to find that link. It is now 10:15. I'm going to suggest that we take a short break and reconvene at 10:25 in confidential session. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day to the public, and we'll see members of the board on the other side.